Hi, welcome back. We got a special guest. He is a musician, writer, performer. Please welcome Kelly DECO. Kelly, how are you?
Hi, I'm Kelly DECO. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Live from Eagle Rock, right next to Pasadena and right east of Glendale. It's good to
Yes.
connect with you. Now I understand you grew
Yeah,
up
we have the
in.
name Rocc in the town I live, a little whatever you want to call it, I live in.
Great. I understand you grew up in Northern California, up in the Burlingame area, just south of San Francisco. Talk about growing
I
up and falling in love with music. Who were those artists? Who were the influences that made you want to do this?
That is a great question. You know, I grew up along the Sacramento River, kind of like Tom Sawyer out there. And the interesting thing was you couldn't get into any trouble because there's nothing to do except for adventure. And uh, and yet my father was living over in Burlingame, so I would be going into the city and having the adventures of the city, especially during that era where you had a lot of really good rock and roll and live music happening. Um, and so it was it was two different worlds. When I was about 5 years old, I would pretend I was in a rock and roll band, and I had a bandstand in my backyard, and I would I think it was called the Snoopy Gang, and I had I was doing the rock thing, pretending to be a rock guy. And pretty much all of my life, I've been doing that kind of thing, pretending to be a rock guy. And then I started actually making music and got into a little band and wrote songs. And I was always interested in writing, and it seemed like that was kind of my what I was called to do: keep writing things, writing books and boxes and popsicle sticks full of writing things. And that came up. Finally, I made a little record and had a little success with that. Played small clubs in that Bay Area and also near Sacramento. I opened for Rocc. That was really a fun thing to do, and I realized, oh, this is an interesting business. And then moved. We got some interest to go to LA, and we came down here and did a small little demo connected with Robert Stigwood, and we and that it was later, but it came out really good. And when we were done with that, I just happened to bump into a gentleman that ended up being the manager for Buffalo Springfield, and his name was Richard Dickey Davis, and he hooked me in with working on movies, and he was a good friend of Val Garay, who I didn't know then, and so I spent 30 years making records and working on movies. I'm a scenic artist, and and uh, and then the producer I worked with, who was from Northern California, his name was Nick Tembrook, um, uh, has always been around me, and he's a friend of a lot of famous jazz people, and he's a great music side producer, like a George Martin, knows the music and knows how to make whatever you're doing musical. And and um, about a year and a half back, I hadn't made music because I'd gotten married a few years back and raised a child and kept working in movies. And I said, well, let me, was there anything left in the gun here? And started to write some songs, just writing music. I always just write the music first, and then I think, even like Rod Stewart said, that the idea will come to you if it does. And so I wrote a couple of things, and then I took it over. There's a pianist, classical piano guy I work with. Went to his place and ran it down with him until we just recorded it on a little iPad, and did that about once or twice a week until there was close to 30 songs. And I was surprised at how much was still in the gun, and so that was cool, that we had there was something left. And they were very the songs are very the style that I was writing in was kind of like two note melodies, but where you're playing two notes at the same time and you're running down an A or B, different keys or whatever. and it's ended up sounding a lot like Bacharach because of the piano and all that. So that's when I thought this is kind of cool and this is different, and it's like what I've always really liked about music. It was simple and interesting, and you know, told a story and all that, and took me somewhere. And so I put the words to them as they came to me, and I was looking out outside of the norm for, you know, a thing I was inventing in my mind called Victorian futurism, and you know, space, love, rock, galactic fantasy songs, and things with a mix of 70s and futuristic spins on people we know about, like David Bowie, Meatloaf. My influences earlier on were Anthony Newley, Frank Sinatra. You know, some of the early cowboy stuff was always great, of course, blues. So, you know, it was a big, like, okay, roll the dice now. And next thing you know, we have some cool songs about interesting things, about art and love. You know, relationships are always a part of it. And, you know, when you grow up, and now I'm, you know, not just a kid anymore, I actually can feel what it feels like to go through, have someone close to you die, or a relationship where it doesn't work out, or things that aren't perfect. And so I came back to the table here with a lot more to give, and it was actually kind of painful. The silliness of these songs was one thing, but the fact that they hurt meant that they mean something to me, and I think that made the record like maybe all records should be when they're done by people from the 70s and et cetera, 60s, or wherever they're from, and they have this real thing that they're bringing. They're bringing it, you know, as people say. And I was able to bring it, and that was really interesting. That for one first time in my life, I was really honestly bringing things that hurt, and even though they're about, you know, a spaceship ride or something, or about you know, one of my songs is about an Edward Hopper painting called Automat Girl, and it's just a great song. And so, you know, all that came together, and next thing you know, I'm talking to Nick Pembroke, and I said, I got this record here, and I really want it to sound like something from the really early 70s, you know, Linda Ronstadt, you know, Andrew Gold, right? You know, some people don't even know those people, but there was a real raw but clear, powerful, in-your-face sound. And Nick says, well, you know, I'm working with, you know, my partner is Nick is Val Garay, and I said, well, and he goes, yeah, and he invented that. So well, maybe he'll do that, and he'll do the record, and then sure enough, he did, and we became good friends, and he brought what he brought to the music was remarkable. He has an ability to bring things to life in a way that it's amazing. And after I heard the record, after he finished, because he produced, engineered, and mixed the record. Of course, he has assistants, but nonetheless, he spent a lot of time. I was floored by how good it sounded, and that probably explains why he's got 5 Grammys and 130 platinum records. But nonetheless, we became friends too, and he's a good guy to hang with, and he's got tons of stories. And just, you know, when he came to the studio, he brought his own gear. He brought the drums and the guitars and modules to hook into the mixing board, and, you know, things you would never think you know somebody would bring. And sure enough, I mean, I guess that guaranteed we got the sound, and we sure did. And I'm really proud of it. And you probably can tell that. I don't, you know, but it's a thing. It's been a work of love and pain, and because I've, you know, the close people who did pass away and things like that earlier brought the pain that and anyone who's gone through those things, it doesn't go away, and it makes it kind of tender. But I found that after going to the studio, that little bit of tenderness is kind of what brings something real. You know, if it hurts me to sing it, someone else might feel it too. And so been really happy with that, and really happy with the record. And nobody didn't go too far off on the stream about Northern California. The influences, you know, as I grew up, were all the Northern California rock, 70s rock bands, and just by some weird chance, the Jefferson Airplane folks and people who were also over at the Record Plant Studios, because I recorded at the Record Plant Studios quite a bit early on, and so got to know the great people who were over there. So yeah, you know, Northern California, Southern California, great rock and roll, both places. New York, you know, London, all over the world, great rock and roll. If you can find it anywhere, if you got something to give, you know, be sure to check yourself that what you're bringing is real, because people can tell, and you know, and if you can bring something real to the picture, it strikes a chord, and also if it's different enough. I think I've lived long enough to be different enough to what I'm bringing isn't just saying, oh look, if there's another pop record, maybe I'll try to make that record. I was always going to make this a 70s record. I was always going to make this record just how it's made. It's just great that it got made, and now here it is, a great sounding 70s record. And we brought another, all the people involved are great, including Chipster from the PR company I work with, who's promoting this, and also Johannes, who you might remember him from the great album covers he did for Led Zeppelin and many 70s bands. Allman Brothers, the Riot Heat, you might remember that one. There's some great art going into those records, and we've got that too. So it really helps give this record a place where it fits. It belonged there to begin with, but these people kind of brought the focus in on it and made me feel, you know, where I belong with it, and so now it's easier to talk about, because I can. Of course, although I wrote their songs a long time ago, now maybe a year and a half or so, now that the image matched, because when I met with Johannes, he got it right away. He said, "Yeah, I get this. This is great." And even Chipster said, "Yeah, this is great. This is, you know, this is right out of where I come from." So good on all of them, and of course, a great team ends up putting this thing together. And here, you know, here we are. Now I'm talking with you, and hopefully, when you hear it, you agree. We got some great reviews about. The record is like going back into the 70s, where you can drop the needle and then listen and, you know, go through the whole experience of the record from beginning to end, like they used to do on albums in the album rock era.
Well, no question, the 70s is my favorite decade. Growing up,
Yeah.
you know, as a teenager, listening to all the great artists. It was before MTV kind of made, you know, the visuals more important than the music. You know, the music really had to stand on its own. And like you say, California has such a rich musical heritage, from Northern to Southern California. There's been hundreds and hundreds of iconic artists, you know, come out of these areas. And of course, somebody like Val Garay was in the middle of it. And, you know, he was working with people like James Taylor and Neil Diamond and Leonard Ronstadt, and won those Grammys with Kim Carnes, and started the Record One studio out in Sherman Oaks. Where exactly did you record this album, Constellation?
Well, okay, so when you work with Val, he has to have that mixing console that he had, you know, wherever he goes, that's what has to be a part of the thing, because you don't know beginning, but when you get there, you realize he's going to bring all his own modules and just going to plug them into the board, and that's what he did. And so we found a small little place, and also we needed a classically a big piano, grand piano, because again, like when I wrote the songs, they were very maybe maybe more like Andrew Gold, a lot of piano, and that really helped bring the melody out for me as a singer, and also for all the rest of the players to play off of. And it really makes the song sound, like I said, a lot more 70s because of that. So the answer to the question is, we found a cute little place by the Van Nuys Airport, and it's called Stag Street, and it still has the old mixing console and little drum room and piano and all that at once, and wonderful people. I think the lady's name is Melanie, who runs it. And but it was LA. We filmed in LA. We recorded. But, and then of course the whole thing was mixed by Val at his home studio.
And where does Val live?
I'm sorry, Val lives in Topanga Canyon. Yeah, I'm sorry. There we go. Yeah, and he makes a great martini. So that was good too. We got to have that at the end.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, a lot of history in Laurel Canyon and Topanga Canyon, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Great influences. Definitely bear out on this record, and you've got some great topics to talk about. Tell us about a couple of the songs that you're most proud of, and what were the influences that formed those songs?
Okay, well, initially, the first release, we had two little clips come off the record. The first one was named Automat Girl, and Automat is a painting by Edward Hopper. Now, I'm a big fan of Edward Hopper painting, and I designed a play actually, because I live in LA, and I'm also a scenic artist, and I do sets for movies and plays. And so there's this play that was based on Edward Hopper paintings that I had done, and I got an award, some award for design for one of the local magazines, whatever it's called, Drama Log. Anyways, and I thought that's cool. What if I wrote a song about that, about a painting, and everyone knows, a lot of people know the painting Automat, and so I thought, well, let's take a look at it and look at it like Bruce Springsteen would, and then add a little Morse to it, and then so the idea was about there's this girl and her and her boyfriend are they're skipping out, and they're going to go out on the town and have a great time and try to experience New York City in the early 20s, which is when this painting was made. People don't realize that Edward Hopper was in the 20s when he started painting, became popular. So I imagine what it would be like to be a young person, and this is, I guess, quote, part of the new modern world. And Automat was one of those new luxuries or whatever of the modern world. But from a kid's point of view, you would just be going out because you'd have a place to go. You could go late at night, and of course, and then what the rest is the story about someone going down there. And then I made a point of describing what you see in the picture, but also what she's doing and the motivation behind it. And they're just kids running all over town. And also I made a point of, in the lyrics, to describe two or three other Edward Hopper, known Edward Hopper paintings, and just run them together into the lyrics. So it was a kind of an interesting challenge, and it seemed like people who got it and thought it was kind of cool and clever. And then it just worked. Part of it was I wanted to set it in the 70s, 1970s, that is. And so I started off with kind of an interesting, kind of a false start. And it says, it's a long, slow 70s weekend, and we're waiting for the tumbling dice to fall. And then taking a walk in the New York City, thinking about the Automat Girl. And then the song starts. And so I try to set it up, and it's set up in an interesting way where, again, it's a two-note string melodies with piano, and so it becomes very 70s right away, because it is, and then you put the piano on top of that, and that whole thing with melody is cool. It's very 70s or even late 60s or whatever. But anyways, so that was the story on Automat Girl, and and there's more to it that I won't give away until you hear it, or you can hear it now. I think you can just click a button and find it. It's out there, Automat Girl. And then the next one we put out so far is and the whole record comes out on December 2nd. So the other one that's out now is called Destination Fascination, and that is a song I wrote about thinking about what it was like in LA and all the cities during the 60s, where people were getting tuned in to being turned on and all that. And so I invented this idea of what it would be like if you were going with some people, and you go down to Pandora's Box in LA, or the Sunset Strip, or where you would go to where there's a scene, and you'd be in the scene. And I termed it inness. And so the idea of being in and having a great time and turning on and you know, and then what's going on all over the world, like I said before, the Bay Area, New York, London, you know, all over. And that was happening. It was a big group thing. It was happening at one moment. It seems to be that there's a thing kind of like that starting again with, and this would be more like what people are doing with virtual reality and that world of meta and things like that that are going on. So I thought it would be relevant. And the rest was, you know, how good of a story can you tell, and what do you know, what you experienced, and I did my best to step up to that. And so those two songs are great. In the interview, there's an interview with Val on Electronic Press Kit that I did, where he talks about it, and he says that all the songs are interesting. So that's probably why he did the record, was that on the strength of the songs, and that he liked what he heard. So there's a lot of great songs, and some of them are very close because they're about people that I know and things that have happened, and all of it is trying to look as if you're moving on, you know, past what we're doing now into the future of some sort. And that's why the record is called Constellation. And the constellation is the idea that it's, you know, a constellation, it's a pattern, you know, for me, of retro figures in the stars and their unique designs, and no two are the same. And from the days of sky tellers and futuristic sky tellers, you know, trying to do it in a more of a vintage way, and you know, it's a collection of old and new shifting figures and constellation of songs. And if you look at it like it's the Earth moving through space, and not the stars moving, and by us moving through things, we change our viewpoints, and you know, with imaginary, I try to throw some imaginary modern twists on things we might see in the sky, and also borrowing from, you know, trying to do a futuristic spin on maybe a 70s song by Bowie or Meatloaf or somebody that you really dug, and not being afraid to do it, because most of the people that would be the influences for me are gone. And once they were gone, it's like, well, then what's, you know, this is an empty place. I'm going to take and borrow everything I want from it. And you do anyway. When you do music, you borrow from everybody, all the way back to the very beginning of writing, you know, probably cavemen and banging on drums were borrowing from each other. But to own it is a different thing. So to own it, you got to get in, put those boots on, and run with it the best you can. And if you're lucky, you'll get close to anything that's been done before. And we seem to have done that a little bit on this record. So that's all my life's work for maybe I'm close. And yeah, so that's kind of how it works. I'm rambling a bit, but I wanted to let you know that it's about a futuristic look on things. So but also I'm grabbing from old things to talk about the future. That's why Automat Girl is relevant, because it was the future at one time. You know, people don't realize that Automat was a modern thing, and so that same experience, I believe, is happening now, or can be shown to happen now. And quite a few of the songs go down that road. Some of them go down in more of a Rocky Horror Picture style, which is, when that happens, it's the best moments of the record, because it rocks when it really rocks. So I'm happy for that, and I'm happy that there's a clear, powerful sound, once again created by Val Garay, because that's what he does, and I would have never known that if I hadn't worked with him. So when it comes out on December 2nd, you can please take a listen, run it on down, and let me know. The couple of people who have reviewed it really,
yes, very exciting. Yeah, well,
yeah.
it's definitely moving forward, but like you say, you know, influenced heavily by the great 70s. And like I say, it's my favorite decade. I think it is
Yeah.
truly the blueprint for all the decades that have come since then to draw from. What do you
Yeah.
feel was so special about the 70s that enabled artists to really be themselves and be unique and have such a rich heritage to draw from?
Well, being from Northern California and also being free is a big part of it. I mean, uh, we all know that Chris Christopherson wrote, "Freedom, just another word for nothing left to lose." But the truth is, freedom and honesty were just well, that was the whole thing. In theoretically, I'm a little young for that, but for the initial presence of the '60s was honesty and love and just free to do whatever you want and go do it. So I mean, '70s music was free and honest. They weren't trying to sell those records. They were just making those records and making those songs. And people who work in the film business, in the old days, they would say, if you make a great movie, it'll sell itself. You don't, no sense worrying about it. But nowadays, it's always worrying about making money. And so when you try to add money into the story, you're kind of ruining the whole thing to begin with. So if you've got a world where people are creating good feeling sounds about things that move people, that are personal experiences that everyone feels the same way about for some reason or another, that's rare. That's a rare moment. That was the '60s and '70s, and those songs are brilliant. Every single. I mean, there's so many brilliant bands and so many brilliant artists, and and people seem to have turned away, thinking that there's a natural progression away from that. But I don't think so. I think there's a natural honesty to be involved with that. But to be honest is a big thing, and to have something, interesting to say without just cussing and bad mouthing everybody, and is not that simple. It's just not. So you have to pick subject matter that's interesting and get behind it, and without just what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of negative ugliness, and the '70s wasn't about that. It was about peace and love and harmony and rock and roll, and maybe the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, fine, whatever. All that is a much more positive kind of groovy, as dumb as that word sounds. A groovy thing is a groovy thing, and it's nice, and everyone can enjoy it, and no one's getting harmed by it. So maybe we're at the point now where things are toxic, and we need to take a look back at that. I certainly feel that I do, and I certainly feel that I stay away from anything toxic as much as possible, and try to have a good time. Try to have a good time while we're spinning down this planet. And again, and I'm trying to give people a little bit of an adventure. The Constellation record is about adventure. If you get it with me.
Your mic went out. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
There you
I
go.
think my finger was on it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no
I
problem.
think if you go get this record and listen to it, you're going to go back into the era of the '60s and '70s, and you're going to have a great time. Just run the whole record from start to finish. The album will not be out for a while, but it will be out, and at that point, run the album. But meanwhile, what you can get now is streams, and the CD comes out in March.
Yeah, well, people will definitely react to it. We'll give it a strong review and help spread the word. Again, our special guest has been Kelly DECO. The album is called Constellation, produced, mixed by the legendary VAL GARAY. And of course, with such a team. And he is a creative force. Kelly, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. We look forward to following up with you and staying in touch and networking any way we can. Let's keep that positive energy going forward.
Yeah, thank you. It's getting better all the time.